Out of the clouds, Huns, bullets, wings, all around me. And I looked up to the heavens and I said, oh God, help me. I felt the machine lurch.
I turned my head over my shoulder and I saw that my pilot had slumped on the controls. There was a gasping sound. There I was, suspended in the air with a dead pilot.
The First World War, one of the most brutal conflicts in human history. A time when old tactics clash with new technology. Men entrenched in fortified lines that stretch across Europe are helpless as artillery shells rain down, high explosives shredding anything within range. The soldiers will come to regard the murderous struggle as a meat grinder. But above the savagery of the trenches, another battle is underway. 12 years after the Wright brothers' first flight, the aeroplane has become a killing machine in ways difficult to imagine. Using reconstruction and archive and motion picture footage, we will see how the rudimentary air machines helped win the war. This is not a story about the aces in glamorous fighting machines, but rather about the unsung heroes of the World War I air campaign.
With no parachute, you could either stay in the machine or jump. But either way, death is coming to you.
For these men, the joy of flight has become the cold certainty of sudden, violent death. These are the words, the experiences of the men who fought in the war above the trenches.
Saw your uniform, lad. Yes, sir. Get ready, lads. Yes, sir.
It was a cold, raw morning.
Thank you, sir. Get ready.
The soil on the ridge was slimy and treacherous under the abominable weather conditions.
On your feet.
We were in our trenches waiting for the signal to go. I didn't fancy our chances.
Listen up, lads. Fix. Bayonets.
Climbed out of the trench, prepared for violent resistance, and with a steady stride, rifles and bayonets at the ready, started towards our objectives.
Don't hesitate!
We were well laden with equipment and ammunition. The German front line had just ceased to exist. There was no resistance.
The German guns that should have been pounding our trenches had been overwhelmed by accurate and effective fire from the British heavy artillery. According to the letters and diaries of those who were there that day, the impact the early aircraft had on the success of the offensive was huge.
Bradbury, go around the corner and let me know it's clear. Whiteman, go and check round there.
We didn't encounter any active German except those wounded and killed. One German was knelt in the trench, rocking to and fro with his head in his hands. I do not know if he was saying his prayers or pegging out.
On this day, this is when it all comes to fruition. All the work of the Royal Flying Corps bears fruit. They are the eyes of the artillery. They achieved together the destruction of the German front lines. They opened the way for the army on the ground. Without the Royal Flying Corps, they could have been destroyed by German artillery, they could have been destroyed by the machine guns. That's the reality of it. That's why the Royal Flying Corps were absolutely vital to the success of the offensive.
The 17th of December, 1903. Orville Wright flies 10 feet, 3.5 meters, off the ground, aloft for just 12 seconds. The Wright brothers have developed the first successful aeroplane.
What had been seen as a novelty and exotic eccentricity has begun its rapid evolution into a vital fighting weapon.
There are many attempts to achieve this goal and many failures. These newfangled machines are seen as curiosities or playthings of the rich and the eccentric.
Some regard flying as an exciting sport. Very few consider its value as a weapon of war.
The French, on the other hand, have embraced the concept of powered flight enthusiastically. In the manufacturing of aero engines and government involvement, they lead the way.
Le gouvernement français a beaucoup aidé le développement de l'aviation, et même très tôt. Il y a quand même toujours des officiers français qui suivent les progrès des tout débuts de l'aviation. Et on a en France un vivier de mécaniciens. C'est peut-être ce qui fait la différence entre la France et l'Angleterre. Où l'Angleterre, on a des grandes usines, mais pas une multitude de petits entrepreneurs qui imaginent des nouveaux moteurs.
But the British were still skeptical. In 1908, the Daily Mail reported, "When it is possible to cross the Channel and land at any fixed point, the War Office may be prepared to regard recent experiments seriously."
Within 1 year of that newspaper article, the Frenchman Louis Blériot flies across the English Channel, landing near Dover Castle. Britain's traditional safeguard against an invasion has been overcome. And Blériot wins the Daily Mail's prize of £1,000.
Yet the military staffs of both nations are still doubtful of a practical use for this seemingly novel idea.
In 1914, the assassination of the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the Bosnian capital of Sarajevo ignites a powder keg of European tensions and begins the rapid descent into war as nations answer the call to arms. For Europe, the war of the future is here today.
War may have been a shock to the ordinary citizen, but the air forces of Britain and France were ready. They had their plans, and they mobilised just about every aircraft they had.
It was a mishmash of all kinds of different aircraft. You had the B-2s, you had Blériots, you had Farmans, and for the local people, I mean, it was like a carnival. All these extraordinary machines that they maybe read about before were suddenly appearing above their heads.
Flown by pilots with minimal training, 63 assorted aircraft make the cross-channel flight from Britain to France to enter the fight. As the German army advances through Belgium and France, pilots of France's Service Aéronautique have taken to the sky to seek out the enemy. The airmen of the Royal Flying Corps have also begun their work, observing the enemy's movements and gathering information for the British Expeditionary Force, which has joined its French allies in attempting to halt the German advance.
The Royal Flying Corps and France's Service Aéronautique are now set to enter a war of such ferocity and duration that few could have imagined.
So begins the opening chapters in the history of aerial warfare. As the armies of the German Empire sweep through Belgium and on into northern France, there is a new sound added to the customary noise of battle, the murmuring drone of aero engines in the sky above.
The battle lines are fluid. It is still a war of movement, and the troops on the ground could see no further than the hill or forest in front of them.
The rapidly changing situation makes the Royal Flying Corps' ability to see the other side of the hill crucial to the outcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Welcome to France.
In the first days of the war, the real purpose of the Royal Flying Corps was to discover what exactly the Germans were doing. And that means flying out and observing, taking a note, and coming back and telling the generals, telling them exactly what was happening.
As we got over our area, instead of seeing a few odd German troops, I saw the area covered with hordes of field grey uniforms, advancing infantry, cavalry and guns. We were astounded.
The problem is, though, that you get good intelligence of what's happening, but it's only as good as the use that it's put to. And sadly, sometimes the generals in command didn't take proper notice.
We came roaring back and taken off to GHQ, which was a chateau some miles away. We were ushered into a room with lots of elderly gentlemen covered in gold lace.
Come!
It was Sir John French's own personal conference that was going on.
Sir, Lieutenant Ewan Robergati of the Royal Flying Corps.
Ah, look, it's the boy from the Flying Corps.
Sir.
Where have you been? Have you been flying? What have you been doing?
Sir, gentlemen, I've just returned from our latest reconnaissance. I regret to inform you all that their numbers are in the thousands, supported by many cavalry, infantry battalions, and many artillery batteries. The report is here.
Don't be absurd. My scouts reported no such thing, Sir John. Besides, your machines are frightening our horses.
This is all very interesting, but it simply isn't the case. So tell me, when you're in one of these machines, what can you see? Is it interesting? Does it...
He was patronised out of his skin by Sir John French. All these wonderful questions, you know, would be very interesting if it weren't for the fact that he had some really important information to impart. And Sir John French simply wasn't listening to the information. But what you've got to bear in mind is these were the very, very early days. And as August turned into September, then the authorities actually started to listen.
La célèbre phrase du général Foch, c'est bon, tout ça à l'avion c'est très bien, c'est du sport, etc. Mais pour la guerre, c'est zéro, quoi. Ça n'a aucune valeur. Donc il y a quand même dans le haut commandement des officiers qui sont très sceptiques sur l'aviation.
The flying machines on both sides spare no effort in attempting to provide up-to-date information for army commanders, who use them in a purely reconnaissance role.
But soon, pilots and observers begin firing at rival machines to stop them getting information to the enemy. They improvise weaponry both to attack and to defend themselves against attack.
Is that friend or foe?
I can't tell, sir.
In the first months of the war, there was a real problem with friendly fire. This is basically because an airplane flies across and you don't really know who it is. There's no really obvious identification marks.
Well, shoot at it then!
The other thing you have to remember is that during the early days, troops on the ground with their rifles and people with machine guns fired at everything that went overhead. I mean, they didn't look to see, oh, that looks like a British plane, that looks like an enemy plane. They had no idea what this plane, it just was a plane. The British decided to mark theirs, first of all, with the Union flag. But the trouble is, at a distance, the Union flag looked very much like the Germans' Black Cross.
So they introduce very obvious marking symbols, which for our case is the round L, which became the RFC's symbol. And the French had a similar, and the Germans the Iron Cross. And so you could tell who you were shooting at. As they were flying their missions, they'd see other aircraft. They'd see German aircraft. And of course, there was never a time of peace and love in the air. What they did was try and shoot each other down immediately. Now, they didn't have machine guns. So what they do is they take up carbines, they take up rifles, they even have a shot with pistols, and they try their very best to shoot down their enemies.
Maneuvering through the three-dimensional battlefield of the sky, firing through the cables and struts of an unsteady platform, straining to close on an opponent while keeping an eye out for trouble, means the chances of actually hitting anything are extremely slim, but not impossible.
So there I was. We came across a German airplane, which, to our intense joy, didn't remove itself as German airplanes always do. Anyway, this chap stayed. I was using a service .303 rifle. Yeah. The German was using a Mauser pistol with a shoulder stock. Sometimes we're extremely close. Other times we're out of range. As you know, we couldn't shoot through the propellers at the front. We had to shoot sideways. Purely a hit-and-miss event. We fired off many rounds. I fired over 100. Until, to my intense joy, we saw the German pilot fall forward. And his machine go down.
Yes.
We watched him go down.
Yes.
We'd had our duel, and we'd won!
Despite the odd success, what's clearly needed is a weapon that can bring down an enemy aircraft. A weapon from the battlefield, an airborne machine gun.
It was kind of an arms race building up a machine gun. I mean, that actually could do some damage.
That gave them the firepower to destroy their enemies, but they couldn't get them up. Their aircraft simply lacked the power to lift them off the ground.
The head of the Royal Flying Corps, General David Henderson, is put under pressure to find an urgent solution.
There are no aeroplanes in the RFC really suitable for carrying machine guns. Stop. Request you endeavor to supply efficient fighting machines as soon as possible. See that sent urgently. Thank you.
On the ground, things are not going well for the Allies. The British and French armies are falling back before vast columns of German troops advancing on Paris. Airfields are abandoned in the path of the enemy advance.
The German advance moved much more rapidly than anyone thought.
Ready.
Contact!
The Germans were dropping shells on the aerodrome. The squadron moved off, and everyone else took to the lorries.
As the enemy bears down on Paris itself, the war reaches a critical moment. A crisis is at hand.
2 French airmen observed the advancing German First Army wheeling to the southeast, away from Paris, opening up its vulnerable flank to a counterattack. This move is confirmed by further reconnaissance flights. It is a turning point in the war. Soon, exhausted armies will dig in. A line of trenches and earthworks stretch from the North Sea to Switzerland. This is siege warfare in an industrial era. The big guns, the heavy artillery attempting to punch open the line while suppressing enemy batteries with concentrated fire. But to do this, they need accurate target information.
Went out to sketch trenches, very cold. Got a sketch with difficulty owing to intricacy of the lines of the trenches. Came down after 2.5 hours.
On the ground, weapons are developed and adapted in an attempt to fortify the skies above the front lines.
Very early on, they come under anti-aircraft fire. This is, shells bursting around them. Some became very nervous, and others responded by making a joke of it. Famously, one pilot used to shout, "Archibald? Certainly not!" After a louche music hall song of the time, which soon got changed to, Archie, and they referred to it as Archie. But it's a way of masking your fears. That's what's going on here. It's a real threat, and they're masking that threat.
Archibald? Certainly not. Get back to work at once, sir, like a clock. When single, you could waste time fooling, but lose work now for honeymooning.
I wonder how my nerves will stand with this almost daily bombardment by Archie. Archibald can reach you at 10,000 feet and belches forth dirty black and yellow smoke. The noise of the shell bursting is almost enough to make one stall the machine with fright. I could hear the pieces of shell whistling past. I suppose the end will be pretty sharp if Archie catches one. I think I'd rather it caught me than crumble at my machine. One would have far too long to think when falling from 4,000 feet.
As airmen of both sides seek out targets for the heavy artillery and try to prevent their opponents from doing the same, the aerial battle begins in earnest. The big guns intensify the killing and will cause the death of millions.
Using the kind of language that makes the sergeant blush. Who wouldn't join the army? That's what we all inquire. Don't fit me to the poor civilians sitting around the fire. Oh, 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 it's a lovely war. A lovely war. Be a soldier, eh? Oh, it's a shame to take the pay. As soon as the valley is gone, we feel just as heavy as lead. But we never get up to the sergeant brings the breakfast up to
The conflict that was meant to be over by Christmas enters a new year, with millions of soldiers facing each other across no man's land.
It is a deadly impasse that cannot be broken with the military tactics of the day. The war has become a stalemate.
It looks offensive.
The problem for the generals is that everything they did, the other side countered. They constantly changed their tactics, defensive tactics. The solutions will take the best part of 3 or 4 years to sort out. And the generals are grappling with this in the first years of trench warfare. They don't know what to do. And it costs a lot of lives. To probe beyond the German defences, to feel out their areas of weakness, to locate key targets like batteries or headquarters or machine gun posts. The only thing that can do it efficiently is aircraft. And then they will guide the guns of the Royal Artillery. They will bring down the shells to destroy those key targets. That's the role of the Royal Flying Corps. They are the handmaidens of the Royal Artillery.
Flown by the pilot sitting in the rear seat, with the observer sitting up front, surrounded by wires, struts and fabric, the BE-2 is the workhorse of the Army observation machines. Designed as a stable viewing platform rather than a fighting machine.
At the very beginning, observers were just noting what was underneath them. They would try and remember, then they started taking up notepads.
Very quickly, they move on to cameras. They're going to have photographs to actually record the details of the trenches, the batteries below them.
Morning, boys.
Morning, sir. Good morning, sir.
Right, you know the drill. When you're ready, pull the slide backwards and forwards to replace the plate. When your magazine is full, simply slide it out. Replacing your cockpit, you should have plenty in there already. Slide back in, and you're good to go. When you're ready to take the photograph, pull your string, release the mechanism, always remember to reset it afterwards. Right, okay with that?
Thank you, sir.
The pilot must fly the plane with one hand, which is difficult enough, while taking a picture with the other, and all the while dodging anti-aircraft fire.
The pilot had to look after the camera because, at least from his seat, he could look right down. There was a bit of wire or string with a ring on it to pull every time you wanted to take a picture.
Now, the idea was you would be travelling over the enemy front line. You would take a photograph here, then you'd wait a bit, you take a photograph here, and when they were down on the ground, they'd be developed, and what you would have would be a mosaic map of the front line.
I've known my hand to lose the plate as I took it out of the cameras. I've cried with the numbness and the pain at losing photographs that I've been trying to get.
But what you ended up with finally on the ground were these very, very complex maps of the ground, these mosaic maps which showed exactly what was going on at the enemy front line and for quite a distance behind the enemy front line. You had intelligence officers who were trained to understand what was going on, what these maps were telling them. They could tell extraordinary things.
Every aspect of traditional warfare is changing. Evolving weaponry, new technologies demand new methods. Radio communication is now possible from plane to ground, but it is far from sophisticated.
For accurate artillery targeting, they devised a system known as the clock code. The target would be marked on a reconnaissance photo, somewhere like here, and over the top of it would be placed an imaginary clock face with 12 o'clock at north. Now, also around the center of the target were a series of concentric circles, AC, B, C, and DON. Now, the aerial observer would be flying above the target and he would watch the fall of the shell. If he reported, using Morse code, that it had fallen at B3, that meant 50 yards to the right, and this enabled the guns to adjust their aim accordingly.
When they were all firing at the exact same spot, and the artillery observer was happy, then the guns, the whole battery, would pour fire on that same position.
You often found you had sensibilities and feelings hurt by this new way of doing things, because up till now, the artillery had always been in control of its own destiny. It had decided who to fire on and how to do it. But now, you had these airplanes in the sky who were able to wire down to individual batteries, telling them where to fire.
Là, il y a une résistance, un scepticisme, parce que les artilleurs disent c'est nos batteries, c'est nous qui décidons quand et où on tire. Mais ils doivent reconnaître qu'ils ne voient rien et qu'ils sont incapables de tirer avec précision.
In under a year, aircraft had become crucial to the battle.
In order to help break the stalemate in the trenches, they are now the eye in the sky. And this ability to spy on the enemy means the accuracy of the artillery is vastly improved. Their only task now is to prevent the enemy from doing the same.
So you get in the first stages of a battle for control of the skies. Your aircraft need to shoot down their aircraft. You need to deny the area above your trenches. You need to gain access to the area above their trenches.
And that is how the fighter aircraft, known at the time as scout aircraft, came into play. That is how the war within a war, the fighters, the gladiators, the duelists, who came up against each other in the sky.
In the summer of 1915, a new breed of aircraft is developed, the fighting biplane. Adapting an earlier design, these planes have a propeller behind the pilot, pushing rather than pulling the plane through the air, leaving an open field of fire for the machine gunner.
But this comes at a cost, because a drop-off in power makes it slower than its rivals.
The Vickers FB-5, nicknamed the Gun Bus, is the first aircraft designed purely for air-to-air combat.
At the same time, the slow but essential observation machines like this one are being armed for their own protection. No matter how inappropriate or awkward this might be, the sky has become a battlefield.
Even when they got machine guns, that's not the end of the problem. How do you aim them effectively from an aircraft moving at 80, 90 miles an hour? So what you need is to be able to aim the whole aircraft and fire through the propeller direct at the target so that the person in their seat fills your sights. That's what you need.
Various methods are tried to arm front-engine biplanes with an effective forward-firing gun. Here in this Bristol Scout, the machine gun is mounted on the side of the aircraft where the pilot can operate it. But with the gun mounted at a 45-degree angle to miss the propeller, accurate firing is difficult. But it was in a Bristol Scout with such a mounting that Captain Lano Hawker destroyed 2 enemy aircraft and damaged a 3rd, becoming the first fighter pilot to be awarded a Victoria Cross. Raymond Saunier, a French engineer and aviator, had been developing a mechanical synchronization method that allowed a machine gun to fire through the spinning propeller without hitting the blades. The mechanism lacked precision, so he fitted armored plates to the propeller blades to deflect the odd bullet that struck them. initial tests were not successful, and Saunier abandoned the whole idea. French pilot Roland Garros adopts this design. Rejecting the mechanical synchronization method completely, he relies on the steel plates alone to deflect any bullets striking the propeller blades. 7% of bullets hit the steel plates and ricochet off harmlessly. The rest pass through. On the first day of April 1915, Garros flies directly at an unsuspecting German observation machine. As the hail of bullets streamed from his machine, the German aircraft becomes the first to be shot down by a forward-facing machine gun firing through its propeller.
After scoring 5 kills, Garros is forced to land in enemy territory when his aircraft is hit by ground fire. Soon, his aircraft and its rudimentary modification is in the hands of Anthony Fokker, the Dutch-born German aircraft designer.
Et là, Fokker, donc, qui est néerlandais d'origine, mais qui travaille pour l'industrie aéronautique allemande, perfectionne considérablement les choses avec d'excellents techniciens, ingénieurs allemands. Et lui, il met au point un système où vraiment la mitrailleuse tire à travers l'hélice sans jamais toucher l'hélice.
Within weeks, Fokker designs a practical interrupter gear, synchronizing the machine gun's rate of fire with the spinning of the propeller. It is fitted to the Fokker Eindecker.
The advent of the Fokker monoplane is a big game changer. This is an aircraft that can shoot through the propeller. They dive down, out of the sun, to hit them from behind and to shoot them through the back of the head before they even know you're there.
The Allied fighting machines are now at a serious disadvantage. It will be many months before they develop an effective synchronizing gear for their aircraft. Until they do, the Eindecker, with its forward-firing machine gun, will cut a swathe through the reconnaissance and fighting machines of the Royal Flying Corps.
The Fokkers evidently worked to some pre-arranged plan. The first attack was made between us and the Somme. Alan had his observer shot dead as he was firing back.
The German Imperial Flying Corps, or Fliegertruppe, are taking control of the skies. So in an attempt to limit losses, orders are issued from RFC headquarters.
Until the Royal Flying Corps are in possession of a machine as good as or better than the German Fokker, it seems necessary that veteran tactics are employed. In the meantime, any machine proceeding on reconnaissance must be escorted by 3 fighting machines.
One response to the Fokker problem was to fly in formation. That instead of sending just one aircraft to perform a mission, you'd send 2 or 3 or 4. But some pilots could only see the problems because, of course, it means a whole new raft of skills they had to learn. How exactly are they going to stay in formation and still look round? They could see the problems, but they didn't see the advantages. And the real advantage is, of course, that together they could defend each other, whereas on their own they'd be helpless.
Trench's strategy of attack, always attack, that mirrored the strategy of Hay on the ground, was followed, but it didn't necessarily make everybody happy. People didn't want to feel that they were forced into sacrificing themselves, and there were certainly pilots and observers who objected.
Headlines in the British press dubbed the airborne slaying as the Fokker Scourge, and British airmen as Fokker fodder. The French air services are also suffering heavy casualties against the Eindecker. So Commandant Dupety and Brigadier General Hugh Trenchard, the new commander of the Royal Flying Corps, agree to share operational information. It's the start of a cooperation that will play a crucial role in the year to come, a year that will see 2 of the bloodiest battles of the conflict, Verdun and the Somme. The Allies plan to open 1916 with a major offensive that will overwhelm the German army. Artillery will batter their line to pieces, followed by a breakthrough that will roll up the line and hopefully end the war. But the Germans have their own plans, and they strike first, here at Verdun.
Alors, Verdun, c'est la bataille la plus connue en France, c'est la bataille décisive qui pratiquement dure une bonne partie de l'année 1916. Et Verdun, c'est une bataille de courage puisque l'armée allemande et son commandement tentent une saignée à blanc, c'est-à-dire épuiser, détruire l'armée française en tuant un maximum de soldats français. De Verdun est effectivement un moment décisif parce qu'il y a une prise de conscience par l'état-major français, par Pétain, etc., de la nécessité de contrôler le ciel pour avoir les meilleures informations sur les mouvements adverses. Donc on va réorganiser tactiquement et techniquement aussi l'aviation française afin qu'elle puisse rivaliser, même prendre le dessus sur l'aviation allemande.
Les avions peuvent être divisés en deux groupes, les machines de l'armée et les machines de combat. Ces avions peuvent être utilisés de deux manières différentes, soit en utilisant les machines de combat pour protéger les machines de l'armée, soit en les laissant se débrouiller pour que les machines de combat puissent faire leur vrai travail de combat.
More pilots are needed at the front. At military flying schools in England, new recruits are being trained to fly and fight as rapidly as possible. But with the most experienced pilots being sent to the Western Front, there is a shortage of capable instructors to teach the essential principles of combat flying. New machines are being produced to rival the Eindecker, the single-seat DH-2 and the two-seater FE-2B. Pusher types with a propeller mounted behind the pilot, thus allowing a front-mounted machine gunner a clear field of forward fire. Squadrons of these machines and their pilots have been arriving on the Western Front.
The Royal Flying Corps changes its tactics, applying the lessons learned from the French at Verdun, that of aggressive and offensive action over enemy lines. The scouts, the fighting machines, will fly ahead of the reconnaissance planes to engage and contain the enemy. Despite its fearsome reputation, the Fokker monoplane is not actually a particularly good machine. It relies purely on surprise and its groundbreaking synchronized gun, a mechanism the French have adapted for their own Nieuport fighter. The Eindecker has met its match.
This spirit of the relentless offensive is established at the very highest level of command.
The sound policy, then, which should guide all warfare in the air, would seem to be this: to exploit this moral effect of the aeroplane on the enemy, but not let him exploit it on ourselves. Now, this can only be done by attacking and continuing to attack.
With its latest machines, the Royal Flying Corps claws back control of the skies over the British trenches. In France, new commanders are now in place. General Douglas Haig commands the British Army in France, and Brigadier General Hugh Trenchard is the officer commanding the Royal Flying Corps.
Both are firm believers in the offensive methods recommended by this book, the British Army's Field Service Regulations. It says, decisive success in battle can be gained only by a vigorous offensive. Half-hearted measures never attain success in war, and lack of determination is the most fruitful source of defeat. And it goes on to say, the advance of the firing line must be characterized by the determination to press forward at all costs.
There are now 27 RFC squadrons spread along the Western Front. The unsung heroes of the Corps, the pilots and observers of the Army Cooperation aircraft, are about to be tested in the fires of a gargantuan battle.
The Somme offensive. Originally intended by General Joffre as a major French assault, it is modified to relieve the pressure on the French at Verdun. The role of the British Army has increased, as is the hope for a breakthrough and a rolling up of the German front. To make this happen, a major effort is required to support the ground troops. So the artillery observation machines range broadly over the enemy territory.
The aeroplane was flung up with a shell that had just gone underneath and missed by 2 or 3 feet. This was continuous, so the machine was bucking and jumping as if in a gale. This was really terrifying.
Crouched in their trenches, the troops can only see the devastated landscape of no man's land. The enemy's unbroken front line is out of sight.
It's time. Right, ready? Make ready!
The Royal Flying Corps has done its job. It has taken control of the skies, carrying out its duties as the eyes of the artillery. It has provided targets for the heavy guns and harassed the enemy right up to the dawn of the attack. Now, from their aerial platform, buffeted by passing shells, they watch a tragedy unfolding below.
On my whistle!
100,000 men, each carrying over 28 kilograms of equipment, moved towards the German defenses. In spite of a targeted, saturated battering of over 1.5 million shells on the enemy lines, they still face a nightmare of intact barbed wire.
Keep moving!
An enemy emerging unscathed from deep dugouts, and the annihilating fire of countless machine guns, laying down a hail of impenetrable crossfire. The British Army suffers over 57,000 casualties. 19,000 of them dead or dying of their wounds in just one day.
Early patrolled the scene of British attack. Clouds of smoke rolled over stricken ground. All around Gommecourt, ground was pitted and pockmarked, but all was still. They say you could see blood in the craters formed by the shells.
The Somme was a failure, not because of what went on in the sky. We weren't ready for this kind of attack. We just didn't have the capability to destroy 3 trench systems, each of 3 trench lines, with huge redoubts, with deep dugouts, with massed barbed wire. We had a lot of guns, but we didn't have enough. We had a lot of shells, but we didn't have enough. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot more resources needed to achieve that control of the battlefield.
The Royal Flying Corps has maintained its command of the air, restricting the German air service to the defence way back from its front lines. But it's been at a horrific cost.
I have lost a good many machines lately, and a certain number of pilots, but really they had done splendidly. We have done 1,200 hours flying a day, which makes you think a bit. And a lot of pilots have done 5 to 6 hours flying a day, and this is going on day after day. The fighting is going well, and the pilots are doing splendidly.
The tragedy of the Somme has been rooted on the ground in the blood of the battlefield. Yet the aerial battle has been seen as a positive achievement for the Royal Flying Corps.
There is appreciation and a chilling note of warning from General Haig, Commander-in-Chief.
Throughout the last 3 months, the Royal Flying Corps in France has maintained such a measure of superiority over the enemy in the air that it has been enabled to render services of incalculable value. The result is that the enemy has made extraordinary efforts to increase the number and develop the speed and power of his fighting machines. He has unfortunately succeeded in doing so, and it is necessary to realize clearly and at once that we shall undoubtedly lose our superiority in the air.
But the men in the trenches are still deadlocked in a hopeless stalemate. The casualties are multiplying. In the coming year, the enemy will revise its aerial strategy and strike back. And the butchery will reach into the sky, beginning the slaughter that will be remembered in the history of the Royal Air Force as Bloody April.